Four-story concrete barracks building in eastern Ukraine. Occupied territory under Russian military control since the 2022 invasion. Deep winter night, temperature -13 Celsius. Clear sky, no wind, stars visible overhead. Inside the building, 580 Russian soldiers slept in metal bunks, exhausted from preparations for upcoming offensive operations. The building was Soviet-era construction, reinforced concrete frame with thick brick walls. 4 floors, each packed with different elements of the Russian battalion. Ground floor housed battalion headquarters, where a Russian lieutenant colonel and 14 officers worked late, updating maps and finalizing tomorrow's movement orders. Second floor held 2 Russian rifle companies, 240 soldiers in rows of bunks. Third floor was identical, another 2 Russian companies, 240 men. Fourth floor contained Russian support personnel, mechanics, supply sergeants, 24 men total. Outside in the freezing darkness, 18 Russian BTR-82A armored personnel carriers sat parked in 2 neat rows, 12 against the eastern wall of the building, 6 against the western wall. Standard Russian practice, kept vehicles close for quick deployment, protected them from weather. 4 Russian sentries walked posts around the perimeter, stamping feet against the cold, occasionally ducking into heated entryways to warm frozen hands. What the Russian forces didn't know was that 5 nights earlier, while the building sat empty, 8 Ukrainian combat engineers had spent 3 nights in the basement installing explosives. Ukrainian intelligence had identified this building as the planned location for a Russian battalion preparing for offensive operations deeper into Ukrainian territory. The decision was made to eliminate the entire unit before they could launch their attack. Ukrainian sappers brought 1,200 kilograms of military-grade plastic explosive, carefully placing charges in 28 locations throughout the basement. 16 main charges of 50 kilograms each were molded around primary load-bearing columns. 8 secondary charges were positioned around smaller support pillars. 4 more charges were placed on central beams. Every charge was precisely positioned by the Ukrainian demolition experts to focus blast inward, to shatter concrete rather than simply explode. Detonation cord connected all charges for simultaneous ignition. Redundant radio detonators and backup timers provided multiple firing methods. The Ukrainian team's installation left no visible trace. The basement was sealed. The building appeared normal. The Russian battalion arrived the previous evening and occupied the building without inspection. Russian commanders didn't check the basement. Nobody swept for explosives. It was a solid rear area building in what they considered secured territory. What threat could there be? By nightfall, all 580 Russian soldiers were settled in. Heat worked, water worked, lights functioned. Russian soldiers joked it was the nicest quarters they'd had in months. 2 kilometers away, a Ukrainian observation team watched through thermal imaging as the building filled with Russian personnel. They counted vehicles, noted guard patterns, observed Russian sentries seeking warmth. Everything was recorded and reported to Ukrainian command. At 0330, Ukrainian command received confirmation that the building was fully occupied with Russian forces, personnel sleeping, guard alertness minimal. Authorization was given. The Ukrainian operators initiated the detonation sequence. At 0340 exactly, a Ukrainian radio operator transmitted the signal from 3 kilometers away. The signal activated the receivers attached to the explosive charges. Multiple detonators fired. 1,200 kilograms of Ukrainian-placed explosive converted to expanding gas in less than 1 millisecond. The basement erupted. 16 massive concrete columns shattered. The Ukrainian engineers had shaped the explosion to pulverize supports, not blow outward. Temperature at detonation points reached 3,000 Celsius. Shockwave propagated through the entire structure faster than sound. A Russian sentry standing at the main entrance saw brilliant flash through windows. Ground shook, underground thunder. Before he could process what was happening or alert his Russian commanders, the building began moving. First second, the ground floor dropped. With supports gone, 3 floors of Russian-occupied barracks above, thousands of tons of concrete, steel, brick, 580 Russian soldiers had nothing holding them. The first floor compressed into the basement void. Walls buckled, floor slabs tilted, everything horizontal became chaotic angles. The Russian lieutenant colonel was leaning over a map table planning operations when the floor vanished beneath him. Table, chairs, 14 Russian officers, walls, everything dropped straight down. The ceiling weighted with the second floor of Russian soldiers fell onto them. 200 tons of concrete crushed the Russian headquarters in 2 seconds. 15 Russian officers died without understanding what killed them. Second floor pancaked onto the compressed first floor. 240 Russian soldiers, most asleep, fell through breaking floor slabs. Metal bunks twisted and collapsed. The ceiling, actually the third floor of more Russian troops, came down on top. 12-ton concrete panels that had been floors became crushing weights. Walls disintegrated. Support beams snapped. A Russian private on second floor woke to falling sensation. His bunk tilted. The Russian soldier above disappeared as ceiling opened. Then weight, incredible weight, pressed from above. The concrete panel crushed his bunk flat. His last thought was confusion. No time for fear. Third floor followed second. 258 Russian soldiers experienced the same sequence. Floor giving way, ceiling falling, compression. Some were thrown clear initially, others caught between slabs. The noise was beyond description. Concrete grinding, metal shrieking, deep bass rumble of thousands of tons in motion. Fourth floor, the topmost level of Russian support personnel, had furthest to fall. 24 Russian men briefly airborne as building dropped from under them, before debris mass rose to meet them. They fell 15 meters into maelstrom of concrete and steel. Side walls no longer supported internally, toppled outward. Eastern wall, 3 stories of brick and concrete weighing 2,500 tons, leaned and fell like a tree. Crashed directly onto 12 Russian BTRs parked against building. Impact catastrophic. Russian armored vehicles designed to withstand bullets were crushed under thousands of tons. Turrets crumpled, hulls split. Russian vehicles compacted to half their height. Western wall fell onto 6 Russian BTRs with similar results. 1,200 tons of building materials buried the Russian vehicles completely. Final fragments settling. Dust cloud erupted 80 meters high, obscuring everything. Debris flew outward. Bricks, concrete chunks, metal fragments. A piece of rebar whistled past the Russian sentry's head. He threw himself flat. 11th, the noise stopped. Where there had been 4-story building housing a Russian battalion, now a rubble hill 6 meters high. Dust cloud spreading. The Russian sentry couldn't see other guards, couldn't see building, couldn't see Russian BTRs. Everything gone. He keyed his radio with shaking hands to Russian command. "This is Post 1. The barracks has collapsed. Repeat, the barracks building has collapsed. Send everyone." Inside the rubble, 580 Russian soldiers were dead, dying, or trapped. The Ukrainian demolition had been so perfectly timed and executed that collapse was so fast most Russian soldiers never woke. Approximately 280 Russian soldiers died in first 5 seconds, crushed under falling concrete. Another 190 Russian soldiers were mortally wounded, crushed limbs, internal injuries incompatible with survival. About 110 Russian soldiers trapped but alive with injuries. A Russian junior lieutenant found himself in complete darkness, pressed from both sides by concrete, 40 centimeters of space above his face. He could breathe, couldn't move. Heard voices of other trapped Russian soldiers moaning, but couldn't determine directions. A Russian sergeant was trapped with both legs pinned under concrete beam. Conscious. No pain initially. Shock providing mercy, but cold. Temperature inside rubble began dropping immediately. Heating destroyed. Pipes ruptured. Outside -13. Inside, temperature fell toward freezing. The Russian sergeant tried calling for help, but voice disappeared into rubble. After 20 minutes, voice gave out. After hour, he stopped being cold. After 90 minutes, stopped being conscious. This Russian soldier died 3 hours after collapse, 50 meters from Russian rescuers, but they never found him in time. 4 Russian sentries outside were killed by falling debris. 2 at main entrance crushed when portico collapsed. 2 at rear struck by wall fragments. By 0400, 20 minutes after the Ukrainian operation concluded, a Russian reconnaissance team arrived. 6 Russian soldiers with flashlights approached what had been their battalion's barracks. In their lights, they saw devastation that seemed impossible. One Russian officer radioed, "Send everyone, heavy equipment, medical, everyone is gone." By 0500 1st Russian Rescue Team, 40 soldiers with hand tools began removing rubble, searching desperately for their comrades. Where to start? Collapse zone covered 5,500 square meters, 8,000 tons of material. They heard voices of trapped Russian soldiers underneath crying for help, but couldn't pinpoint locations. Every piece moved risked secondary collapse, killing Russian survivors. At 0530, Russian rescuers pulled first survivor, a Russian private near edge under relatively light debris. Both arms broken, ribs cracked, nose broken, but alive, shivering violently from cold. Russian medics wrapped him in blankets, loaded him into truck. He kept asking his Russian comrades, "How many got out?" Nobody answered. At 0600, Russian heavy equipment arrived. 2 bulldozers, 1 crane. The Russian rescue commander faced impossible decision. Heavy machinery could move massive slabs, reach deeper faster, but might crush Russian survivors in voids beneath. Work manually and save few Russian soldiers with certainty, or use machines and maybe save more, but definitely kill some. He chose middle path, heavy equipment on edges, manual work where they heard Russian voices. Agonizingly slow, each slab rigged with cables, lifted by crane, moved aside. Each void searched for Russian survivors before continuing. By 0800, 12 Russian survivors extracted. 5 Russian soldiers died before evacuation. Cold was killing Russian wounded as surely as injuries. Hypothermia claimed Russian soldiers who might have lived if rescued faster or if warmer. 100 Russian soldiers became 200, became 500 working the rescue. Working in shifts, move rubble, search for Russian comrades, call out, listen. Work continued through day. Every hour brought fewer Russian survivors, more Russian bodies. Voices of trapped Russian soldiers from beneath grew quieter. A Russian lieutenant trapped in air pocket since collapse was found at 1430, 11 hours after the Ukrainian strike, unconscious from hypothermia. Core temperature 32 Celsius. Russian medics weren't sure he'd survive extraction. He spent 2 weeks intensive care, lost 4 toes to frostbite, but lived. By evening, 16 hours after Ukrainian demolition operation, 47 Russian soldiers pulled out alive. 18 of those Russian soldiers died from injuries despite medical care. 132 Russian bodies recovered. Russian rubble clearing barely started, 20% of debris moved. Work continued 11 days. Gradually piles shrank. Russian bodies accumulated. Russian survivor count stopped increasing after 24 hours. Last living Russian soldier extracted exactly 24 hours after Ukrainian operation. A Russian junior sergeant found an air pocket created by metal beam that landed across 2 slabs, creating protected space. Survived by luck. Beam fell in exactly right position, but this Russian soldier had been in -10 temperature for 24 hours. Both legs would be amputated below knee. 3 fingers removed due to frostbite, but alive. By day 11, all debris cleared by Russian recovery teams. All Russian bodies recovered. Final count precise and terrible. 580 Russian soldiers in building. 421 Russian soldiers died in collapse or immediately after. 96 Russian soldiers died from injuries, some in rubble before rescue, some hours or days later despite treatment. 63 Russian soldiers survived. Of 63 Russian survivors, 8 had minor injuries. Fractures, contusions healing in weeks. 22 had severe injuries, multiple fractures, organ damage, months of hospitalization. 33 had catastrophic injuries, permanent disability, amputations, spinal damage, brain injuries. All 18 Russian BTR-82A's total losses, crushed under thousands of tons of wall, barely recognizable as Russian military vehicles. Russian recovery teams used cutting torches to extract pieces. Most Russian vehicles had ammunition inside that detonated from impact. 6 Russian supply trucks destroyed by debris. 3 Russian medical vehicles damaged beyond repair. 2 Russian maintenance workshops crushed. Site was cleared by Russian forces, rubble hauled away. What remained was flat expanse of broken concrete. No memorial, no marker. Locations simply abandoned by Russian military. Russian military conducted financial accounting. 517 Russian soldiers dead meant compensation to Russian families, replacement costs for training new Russian soldiers. Each Russian officer represented years of military education. Russian equipment losses calculated, BTRs, weapons, electronics. Total calculated Russian loss, $63,283,000. But that number captured nothing of what Russian forces actually lost. The Russian battalion that was supposed to participate in offensive operations into Ukrainian territory no longer existed. Russian plans changed. Russian offensive operations delayed or canceled. Other Russian units had to cover the gap. Psychological impact spread through Russian forces in region. If solid building in what Russians considered secured rear area could be demolished with everyone inside by Ukrainian saboteurs, nowhere was safe. Russian commanders viewed buildings with suspicion. Russian practice of concentrating forces in one location seemed dangerous. Russian units dispersed, which made Russian command and control difficult. Ukrainian intelligence assessed the operation as completely successful. 1,200 kilograms of Ukrainian explosives, delivered over 3 nights by 8 Ukrainian engineers operating behind Russian lines, eliminated entire Russian battalion and equipment before they could launch offensive into Ukrainian territory. The cost-benefit ratio was extraordinary. The psychological impact on Russian forces was beyond measurement. Russian investigation was brief and inconclusive. Initial Russian reports called it structural failure. Old building unable to support weight. This explanation was easier for Russian command than admitting Ukrainian saboteurs had penetrated their rear area and planted massive charge without Russian detection. Eventually, truth emerged through Russian survivor accounts and Rubble examination. Russian demolition experts found residue patterns consistent with shaped charges. Simultaneous failure of all supports could only be explained by coordinated detonation. It was Ukrainian sabotage deep in Russian-occupied territory. Questions were asked in Russian command. How did Ukrainian engineers access the building? How did Ukrainians bring in over a ton of explosives through Russian-controlled territory? Why wasn't building inspected by Russian engineers before occupying with entire battalion? Why were Russian security measures inadequate? Some Russian officers were reassigned, paperwork filed, Russian protocols updated requiring engineering inspections before occupation. But updates came too late for 517 Russian soldiers who died in 11 seconds when their shelter became tomb. The barracks stood 40 years, collapsed in 11 seconds due to Ukrainian demolition operation. 580 Russian soldiers inside. 63 Russian soldiers survived. Numbers tell story of destruction, but cannot convey experience of Russian soldiers waking to floor disappearing. Weight of concrete crushing down. Cold of winter night seeping into broken Russian bodies under rubble. Russian voices calling for help that grew weaker and silent. This is modern warfare in Ukrainian resistance against Russian invasion. Buildings can be weapons against occupying forces. Structures can be traps. Safety is illusion for Russian forces in occupied territory. Nowhere secure when Ukrainian engineers can infiltrate Russian positions and turn Russian shelters into graves with precisely placed explosives and perfect timing. Russian mission was simple: provide quarters for battalion preparing for offensive operations deeper into Ukraine. Result catastrophic: 517 Russian soldiers dead, 63 Russian survivors crippled, 1 Russian battalion eliminated, Russian operations disrupted, Russian confidence shattered. 11 seconds. That was how long it took for 8,000 tons to collapse. 11 seconds for Ukrainian sabotage operation to erase Russian battalion. 11 seconds that continued echoing in minds of Russian survivors and witnesses for rest of their lives. Welcome to warfare where Ukrainian resistance operates behind Russian lines, where Russian foundations explode, where Russian barracks collapse in sequence, where 8,000 tons fall faster than Russian soldiers can escape, where 11 seconds transforms Russian barracks into tomb and Russian battalion into casualty statistics.